I had never been someone who was in charge of keeping children safe, walking and riding like mothers and fathers do. So I didn't realise my own knowledge gap.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 9 of the Squeaky Wheel podcast. We speak with leading influencers about policy, industry and more across cycling, walking and all other forms of human-scaled mobility. My name is Phil Latz and I've been squeaking about various causes for over 40 years.
And I'm Irene McAleese, co-founder of the cycling technology and data company C-Sense. And we're on a mission to help cities transform for more cycling and micro-mobility using data.
Before we introduce this month's guest, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a rating on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're using Apple Podcasts on your phone, you can also leave a review by scrolling down on our podcast page and tapping Write a Review. Your leaving a review will make a huge difference to our ranking in the Apple Podcasts algorithm, which is the preferred platform for many of our listeners. Thanks for your help.
Phil, I saw Tern just introduced a warranty transfer program. What's that about?
Tern bikes are built to last, and so is their support. The warranty transfer program lets current owners pass any unused portion of a bike's original warranty to the next rider through an official Tern process. It protects the bike, boosts the resale value, and gives new owners peace of mind.
That's a great idea. It's actually kind of a win-win, isn't it? So sellers are going to get more for their bike, and then the buyers know that the key parts, like the frame and the fork and the handle post, are all still covered.
The what? What the heck's a handle post, Irene?
Well, a handle post, it's basically the slidey bit on the stem that makes you put the seat up and down really easily with a lever. I think that's the right word for it. Yes.
Now I'm enlightened. Thank you, Irene. It also works along Tern's 7-year warranty support program, which guarantees the availability of critical parts like batteries for at least 7 years after purchase, even if the bike changes hands.
That's so interesting. What is the thinking behind these programs?
Well, Irene, Tern thinks that as more people rely on e-bikes daily, they want customers to think beyond the sticker price and consider how service, reliability, availability of spare parts, and durability affect long-term value.
Fantastic. Today, we are excited to have Prue Oswin join our discussion. Prue, after graduating with degrees in geography and environmental engineering, spent 8 years as a water engineer before switching to active transport in 2009. Ever since then, Prue has been deeply involved in making her home region of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland a better place to walk and ride, especially for children. After working within local government, then for a traffic engineering consultancy, Prue set up her own consultancy that she has run for almost a decade. So we are excited to welcome you today, Prue.
Yes, indeed we are. So in your younger days, you were an active racing cyclist and a professional level triathlete. How did you view road safety and separated cycling infrastructure back then in those days?
Well, actually, before that, I actually went to university in Melbourne, and very much before I got into triathlons, I was very much a commuter cyclist. I did not understand the Lycra world. I remember talking to my friends at the pub and just saying, yeah, no, they're Lycra cyclists. They're not like us. They go around in circles. They're not actually going anywhere. So it took me many years to discover just how comfortable Lycra is and feel a little bit silly about dismissing it so quickly. But yes, certainly, any person who rides a bike has near-death experiences if they're lucky and they haven't come off. So I certainly have my fair share of moments when I remember just abandoning ship off the highway one day when a truck came too close, and I just remembered my dad teaching me in country roads to just right off the side of the road, because that is a much better outcome than going under that truck. The clanging of bikes behind me one day when I was at the front of a peloton and a truck came so close to us and I didn't know what I was going to turn around to behind. Everyone was fine, but yeah, it's still, I see that brand of truck and it resonates. So we have those experiences, don't we? And I think it's important to remember for anyone who rides a bike, this is part of what drives us to do our job well. And then, haven't even spoken about the children experiences.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that actually. So over the last decade, you obviously branched out with your own consultancy, Sidelines Traffic, focused specifically on active travel, where you have done a lot of work regarding children's travel in particular. Can you tell us a little more about what prompted this move?
Yeah, well, I've done quite a lot in Sidelines Traffic, so it hasn't just been about children's travel. It's also very much been about a whole lot of bikeway projects. I've done everything from kind of detailed design reviews through to planning studies. With children's travel, the first studies that I did was back in around 2011, before I had children, and I would identify infrastructure for schools as part of some local work that I was doing. So it was just a project that I was given. When I reflect on that now and what disappoints me potentially or shocks me, I don't want other people to make the same mistake, is that I have this background of being a commuter bike rider and someone just who lived on my bike, since I was a kid. That was really important to me. And I had been a professional sports cyclist as well. But what I didn't realize is that I had never been someone who was in charge of keeping children safe, walking and riding like mothers and fathers do. This is what parents do. So I didn't realize my own knowledge gap when I did that. And it wasn't until I had children that I realized, oh my gosh, you see the world differently, you experience the world differently. Even the assumption that when you cross the road with children, you can hold their hands. If people are pushing bikes, that's not possible. That's not physically possible. If people have more than 2 children, then you're relying on those children to hold hands. This is the task where errors can happen, and we need to design infrastructure to accommodate that so that everybody feels safe and secure. So I guess, it has just been one element of my job. Why I'm quite vocal about this is because when I first started engaging with parents, I found that the infrastructure we were providing were not meeting their needs. I found that they were quite consistent in terms of what they wanted, and it's not actually that difficult. And it's actually oftentimes a lot simpler infrastructure to provide than some of our big strategic links that we focus on.
And it's that lived experience is so important because I know myself in Northern Ireland, actually, there was a very narrow path. It wasn't until I was trying to negotiate it with a pram, a toddler, and a dog that I decided to take for a walk that I realized this is woefully narrow and I have high-speed cars next to me, and the whole thing just became something that was, maybe if you were an able-bodied person walking along, might have been slightly uncomfortable, to actually, this is terrifying and I don't feel safe doing this, and it can really restrict. It can stop people making those journeys, can't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's so much about that. It's a terrifying experience, something that can be normal versus not normal.
Yeah.
I think something that a lot of people don't realize is that the Netherlands' incredible cycling culture, one of the first breakthroughs or, areas of focus was children's transport with the Stop Child Murder campaigns, because this is what women, and mostly women, were experiencing, And I think many of our networks suffer. I think of footpaths and crossings as kind of the real bread and butter basics of an active transport network. If you can't get out of your own street and feel safe with a pram, then you're not going to be able to get to the next street where the facilities might become better quality. I think also one of the things, and there's all sorts of challenges along the way, but one of the things that pops up a little bit is this perceived safety. And when I survey parent communities, we get a whole lot of data about how they feel about specific types of facilities, where they need facilities. And what they're actually tapping into is their threat detection systems inside them. These are evolutionary systems. When we get 90% of people saying this feels unsafe and they're relying on their threat detection systems, that's a data set. It's not perceived safety. It's a data set. There's a threat there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And one of the reasons we were really excited to have you on the podcast today is we had spotted this amazing LinkedIn post that you had done, sharing a lot of this knowledge, particularly in this area around what you've done for the schools area.
Yeah, we'll link to that LinkedIn post in the show notes because it was excellent. I really enjoyed reading it. When you start a new school transport project, why do you first gather input from the local community? That was one of the key points of your report.
Yes, when to understand active transport networks and what people need to walk and ride, we need to know it in a really fine level of detail, as you can only know it if you are someone who tries to use that network. So I think there's two things that are really important about talking to the local community. First of all, it reveals where the network's failing. So, what parts of the network don't meet their needs. Now, we have standard requirements about the width of a footpath, and we have standard requirements about sightlines and various things. But these standard requirements don't necessarily tell us where a network is failing, where it's severing a journey and stopping people, doing something they want to do. So what I've found in these studies is people generally are not requesting upgrades to the widths of paths. If there's something there, they will deal with it unless it's really busy and it feels frightening. But where they are requesting upgrades is when there's nothing there, and that's usually a missing crossing because our crossing guidance just hasn't been designed to meet their needs. The other thing that it puts together is it tells us where they want to go. So I explain in some of the training courses I've been involved in that we're not trying to solve the theoretical problem of where is the network not perfect. We're trying to solve the problem of where can we invest and get the best bang for buck in terms of enabling people to walk and ride. And the places they want to go and the places that they're too frightened to go is that key data. I did have one site where we actually had traffic recordings of how many people were crossing a particular site each day. And in the 2 peak hour, 3 peak hour kind of periods, we didn't have anyone in the peak hour, and we only had 4 people for the whole day. And yet that site was the number one site that people in that town identified that they wanted to cross the road. So it goes back to that thing that we don't build our bridges where people are swimming across the river. Where people are too frightened to go, we're not going to get traffic volumes that tell us that. We need to go into their hearts and minds.
Yes, I was thinking of that analogy when you said it, the people that don't want a new bike lane. It's like, well, yeah, there's no one swimming across that river, so you don't need a bridge there. It's the same scenario. It's a very good illustration.
I kind of think, we're seeking the information about where people want to go and where they're too frightened to go.
Yeah, very good. And how much more easily does the overall community accept the changes to infrastructure when those changes have been made in response to community needs based on the work that you've done in the surveys?
Well, I think it's really effective. What I notice from the local councillors is that they are talking about the projects on Facebook, and they put an announcement and they say something like, the community asked and we delivered, and that's a really good way to introduce new infrastructure. Like often these are raised crossings. I know in the past practitioners have been concerned that we'll put raised crossings in and that will slow vehicles down and that there'll be backlash against that. I haven't seen any serious backlash from all the crossings we've put in. There's been a couple where there's been 1 or 2 people who's had concerns about a local treatment. I think that's important why we have flexibility and guidance, and that's improved as well. But generally these have gone in smoothly, and I just love seeing it on Facebook when the comments are, we need one of these in our area, which shows that the next community over, they want these barriers addressed as well. So that's how we can get a roll on in terms of active transport, when people start singing out and asking for it.
So you've already mentioned raised crossings. So that's crossings where it's raised to the level of the footpath and the motorist has to go over what we would call a wombat or an extended speed hump. Your community survey showed strong concern and consensus about the importance of these raised crossings even on side roads. Why do you think that has been completely overlooked by the Sunshine Coast Council previously and other councils probably worldwide?
Yeah, I think I don't want to single out Sunshine Coast Council because I think they're doing a fantastic job of addressing these issues. I don't have the data. I speculate. I think that we have a lot of design guidance that was developed in a time when we had a lot of the people designing this guidance were driving, and they didn't have that lived experience of trying to get around, especially with children, that extra complicated task. So we've got the guidance that we've got. I would say a lot of it is out of date in terms of this is not meeting the customer's needs. When we identify these side road crossings, it is a really high proportion. Over 90% of people are somewhat or very concerned with children crossing side roads. So that's what we've got. I know in Queensland, the Queensland government has just published new guidance around raised priority crossings at side roads. So that is really good. They've been working on that for a number of years. So they are becoming much more standardised kind of treatments now. So, yeah, I think the good news is that we have design solutions for that as well. And with the wombat crossings as well. So one of the things was we traditionally, I think, just saw those as the kind of treatments we would use in places where important people would gather, in town centres, in places where people are employed and CBDs and things like that, but they weren't justified out in less important places. And I think it's not like that. We really need these kind of crossings that stop vehicles, slow them down, and let a child cross the road. We need those in areas, outer suburbs, busier areas.
Important places. Yeah, interesting. And schools now, you're sort of saying these are important places.
Absolutely. I would love to see a placemaking approach outside schools. Like we have done some amazing placemaking projects at the Sunshine Coast, which is all about seating and shade and beautification and slowing the road environment down. Imagine if we treated our school hubs like that and really made those kind of places well. The book Invisible Women also really influenced me when I was developing this, doing this work, and then reading that book Invisible Women. It just alerts you to how we provide for like the important people getting to work, and we don't kind of classify and congregate all these caring trips, which is a significant proportion of the trips in our networks.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great book. Actually, we should get her on the podcast one day, Phil. That would be a goal.
Absolutely. We'll add it to our wish list. So just briefly to finish off my batch of questions, what do you think the keys are for getting more of your recommendations implemented? You've had some pretty good success. Feel free to brag about it a bit, but what's got things over the line?
Having the community data, I think, is essential for getting things across the line. We love in our industry kind of criticising different segments of the industry. Now, we have engineering standards. What I've found is that engineers are really responsive to having evidence and data about what is needed, and then they will design to address that. So I think this evidence we have at the start of, and we gather at the start of a school project, is really important. I call schools super communicators because they have these amazing communication channels that they have established. They are the hub of a community. I don't know any other institutions or in our communities that have the communication channels in a very localized area that a school does. So even if we are not actually providing for school children, we can gather this data through the school networks. These users don't have licenses, so they're going to be the easiest people to convert to active transport, but they can also tell us what other people in the community need. And that's what we found in one of our studies. The first study that I did was Bli, and the issues that the school children and the school families were identifying were the same things that were affecting older people in the community who couldn't get across the main road through the town to get to bus stops, to get to shops and local services. So I think this is a really good way of getting that data set that can actually be stored on council GIS systems and things, to have this data about where does the community need infrastructure and how can we plan for that in whatever we're doing, whether it's through new developments, major road projects. We have that data set to rely on.
So I love that you're talking about data in order to advocate or to provide the evidence to justify the investment in these schemes. What about on the other side in terms of evaluation? What are you using to evaluate the impact of this, and how has that been useful for you?
Yeah, so at the Sunshine Coast, the way that the infrastructure program around schools is is rolled out to support their Ride School program. So the Ride School program is a program where children are given a beacon to go on the back of their bike. When they get to school, the parent gets an alert that the child has arrived. So this really fulfills a need in terms of that sense of security that your child's arrived. So we have some data showing that the combination of improving infrastructure and providing the Ride School program has seen a 55% increase in the number of children cycling to school at that school. We don't know the walking data.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
It's amazing. And I think the other thing that I like to judge the merits of this program by is how much infrastructure we get out, how quickly we get it out, because that is actually a challenge in active transport when certainly in my career, seeing lots of projects that get to the concept stage, the planning stage, and don't actually end up on the ground. The fact that we can get infrastructure on the ground aligned with best practice road safety principles, where people need it and where people celebrate it so that the next community wants their community to become more active transport friendly as well. I actually think that's one of our metrics, and we should be measuring, how quickly we can get infrastructure on the ground where it's needed.
Yeah, because let's not underestimate the effect of FOMO. Yeah. Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
I understand you're quite innovative with all of the different approaches you've used around data, and Compass IoT data for looking at the impact of the speed of cars was also something that you used to evaluate. Is that right?
Yeah. I think, we are at a great time for putting together new good guidance and new tools like the Compass IoT. So this is connected vehicle data that governments can have access to, and basically you can draw a line on a map anywhere and find out what's the 85th percentile speed on that road. So this has been fantastic in that planning phase. I actually have gone through most of my career with nobody actually funding a traffic survey to support any of my work. It's quite expensive to get that kind of data. And I actually want to be looking at a whole precinct. So I'm not going to single it down to one or two roads where I want to find this information out. So now that we have this information, when someone does something innovative like put speed humps on a road, we can quickly go in there and look at what's been the effect of that and use that to justify, and in my situation, to sign off on using that in another situation where we've also got that kind of unsafe situation. So it's made it cheaper, faster, and again, more evidence-based. Before we had this data, it was kind of like, I think this is going to work, and that's not necessarily going to get your project on the ground.
Cheaper, faster, evidence-based. Love it. It's a good tagline.
So cyclists and pedestrian deaths in the most progressive parts of Europe have been decreasing, but in the USA and Australia, they've been increasing by tragic and alarming amounts. For example, in Australia for the year to June 2025, they were up by 37 and 16% respectively. How much harder does this make it to advocate for more children travelling independently to school?
So there's three principles that have really fallen out of the school studies, and I use them as the guide to how should we address this problem of making it possible for more kids to walk and ride to school. And this is three criteria that we need to satisfy for any kind of investment. And one of them is protecting people from harm. So that's the application of our safe system principles, the best practice. The goal of creating a safe system for road safety in Australia is that no one should be killed or seriously injured. That aligns perfectly with my goal as a mother. If my children are walking or riding to school, I don't want anyone to be killed or seriously injured. The other one is responding to community need. And the third one is feasible and cost effective. So I always run through any suggested advocacy work, infrastructure work, and say, does it satisfy those three criteria? And I don't shy away from saying, that we have harmful environments for children walking or riding to school. There's children in my area who have been killed. They've been killed at traffic lights. They've been killed at side roads. It wasn't their fault. I think we need to listen to parents and we need to respond and meet their needs. So we build the infrastructure that meets their needs. And I also validate parents when they tell me about what crossing they're particularly concerned about and tell them to write a letter. It's a great time to write a letter. Sunshine Coast in my region have done a wonderful job because they are actually allocating a whole lot more money to their vulnerable road user program, which is all about meeting the needs of of people, kids and older people and people with disabilities walking and riding. So there is a funding stream to address those issues there as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good approach, and I like that you're able to bring in those 3 different elements there. So you've been in your business, I think, is it right, you've really been working as a sole operator, or have you had a network around you through Sidelines Traffic?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so Sidelines Traffic has just been me and always been me, but I have an amazing network. And I think these networks are what give us our competencies, because when we are trying to make difficult decisions, we need people to reach out to. There's some amazing people in Transport and Main Roads cycling team in Queensland, real experts in the field of walking and cycling, road safety experts. You know, I just think that network has been the difference between me having an idea, which is like, you know, what do I think about this, to actually that one is worth persisting and things as well. So, yeah, I think people need to realize that when you have small businesses who are just a one-person show, often they have these incredible networks where they're working with other people who are.
Would you say that has almost been an advantage in some ways, that you've been able to be, I guess, quite nimble and a little innovative in some of your approaches coming from a smaller consultancy?
I love that you see that, because, that is definitely the case. When I've taken risks, and I took a risk when I first developed this process for planning infrastructure around schools, I'm well aware it's just my time at risk here. I'm not risking anyone else's job or, you know, financial disaster through a long kind of process. It's just risking my time, which I'm happy to, because there's a purpose to this. Also, the way that I've done, there's a process called adaptive management, which I really like. It's all about experimenting quickly, not taking off a huge pie that's going to take forever to work out, but experiment quickly, learn quickly, and adapt quickly. And I think that's where people need to realize that these small, innovative businesses can really fulfill that part of the market, so that we can take the risk. So then, you know, other organizations can build off the work we've already done, which is partly why, you know, I've been quite open with sharing all of this.
Yeah, I can see that. And, you know, I can see also for a large consultancy, it might be hard to invest the time, you know, billable hours and all of this, you know, that they have to factor in. So you've got a little more flexibility to experiment there, which has obviously paid off as well.
Absolutely. So, and even with things like community engagement, you know, it can be messy. And I'm there going, okay, I'm going to be a buffer between the local government and the community. In this instance, it's coming out through me. And so they've got, you know, me to hide behind. And I'm like, okay, I'm taking some of the risk here.
Yeah. Take my hat off to you. That's amazing.
I did just want to say there was one question that Phil asked before as well.
Yeah.
And those 3 criteria, it's about the safety and the crashes that are happening in Australia. So another quite innovative program that I have been part of is it's called the Scoot School program, Safe Beyond the Gate. It's basically road safety survival skills for high school students or grade 6 and up. But really, the reason we've developed that is after doing a number of these school studies, there's only so much infrastructure that we can actually afford to build. And my thoughts were, when we had a whole lot of micromobility and teenagers and kids getting onto e-scooters and not having any background in cycling, was that we need to be doing our best to at least pass on some education to those children and to give them the best chance of surviving in what is a dangerous environment. You know, I don't shy away from that. That's what my road safety background tells me. So it's the same criteria we apply. You know, we're protecting people from harm. We're responding to community need. Communities want this kind of education being rolled out to keep them safe. The schools are having people walking in saying, what are you doing about the issues with your kids there? And the parents want that safety education. So it complies with that one as well.
It's part of the overall solution, and it's complementary to the other things that you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, you know, so that's another thing that kind of satisfies that. And we go, okay, now we're sending them out there, and yes, there is risk there, but they have this backup policy. It's evidence-based again. We spent long time doing the literature review to say what's the best education we can provide in 2 hours to these kids to give them that backup. And I certainly know with my kids, I love that they've got that backup now because they're actually in the videos and
slave labor.
Oh, absolutely. I grew up on a farm, so yeah, that's all.
So out of your time at Sidelines Traffic, what would be, I guess, your standout project that you are feeling most proud of, that you would like to highlight?
Oh, thank you. Well, I love the school studies. I think it's really important work. And more importantly, just think there's really important opportunities to improve people's lives here. The people are really stretched and pushed in our communities, particularly mothers. I remember someone saying, I don't think anybody's doing it easy right now. So anything we can do to stitch these communities back together and make them, the places they used to be for people of all ages and abilities is really important. And I think, the methods that we've developed are really good for that. They're low cost, they're fast, they've been rolled out in a number of states now. So yeah, I'm really proud of that work. I've been involved with Transport and Main Roads in some of the work they have been leading on crossings, and I think that's incredible work. I won't take credit for it. I just think we've got amazing practitioners in Queensland leading that work to get the kind of crossings that meet communities' needs so they can walk and ride. So yeah, that's really good work as well, I think.
Yeah, amazing.
Mm.
So we're actually coming to the end of our conversation now. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to share with our listeners?
I think you've done a really good job of the questions. I think
thank you.
Yeah. And ones that aren't usually asked as well. I love that we've covered off on some of those structural issues with big business and small businesses. I don't think a lot of people pick up on the opportunities there. When we were talking before, and I didn't mention it, but there was this moment when I was actually developing a guideline on providing for path user safety at driveways. So the issue with cars coming out of driveways. And this was, let me see, there's a lot of gender issues here. So what I heard when I was doing engagement for that project was female practitioners, not with their practitioner hat on, but just saying, yes, it is something I'm concerned about. And the experience that they deferred to were how they keep their children safe when they're walking and riding. So I remember when I was getting this data from these practitioners and I thought, wow, there's a real gender issue here. We've got people who have been looking after children identifying this issue. We've got other practitioners not identifying it. And it's something I wrote an article a while ago about that, because I think it's something that when people go off on maternity leave and they have children and you come back and often your confidence is at your absolute lowest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, you've come back upskilled. Our industry desperately needs this kind of knowledge and experience to inform what we're doing and to make a network that works for all users, including children who don't have licenses, these families who are, escorting them around everywhere. So I think, that's something I think we can focus on more. That book, Invisible Women, is a great avenue for that, but also anybody who has taken time off work, just remembering that.
Yeah, and it's nice to, acknowledge. I mean, there aren't really enough women working in this space to start with.
Yeah.
So absolutely welcoming women back after a break in maternity and really genuinely tapping into that additional insight is what you're saying, that they are bringing or capable of bringing to the table if larger organizations want to give them permission to do it and enable them to contribute.
Absolutely, and have that curiosity about that lived experience, because it's very relevant. I was very shy of applying mine when I first started, and I remember walking down the road one day and hearing these two other mums call out, watch the driveways, and it just hit me. I'm like, it's not just me, it's the whole cohort, and I was doing a driveways guideline at the time.
Wow.
And that's when I realized actually this is much, much bigger.
Yeah, we need our voices in this and to help shape the policies and the guidance and everything.
Yeah,
that is a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there aren't enough of us in this space to start with. So the ones that are there, they need to listen to us.
And that bit, I think I was on the Women in Transport group, and very much in that group is all about, you don't have to have children to be able to learn from people who have these lived experiences. So it's just, I try to make sure I'm not that person in future that's not looking out for experiences that aren't my own. So I'm much more aware of it after having children and going, okay, I wasn't on the ball with this one, but other things I'm going to be more on the ball. And I think we can do so much with education in that space and knowledge share. Okay.
You've got some really fantastic experience that you've shared with us today. That's been terrific, hasn't it, Phil?
Absolutely. It's been brilliant. And you get a second time around when you become a grandparent, I'm here to tell you, of acute awareness of safety of children. But we've run out of time, and Prue Oswin, thanks for squeaking.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Prue.
Well, Irene, what did you think of Prue's comments? Which stood out most to you?
That was a great discussion. I really love that she talked about really just engineers, traffic and transport planners need that evidence to make the decisions. So a lot of what she's doing around the community, consultation is essentially about getting that data that then they can act on. So it's great process, and also helps these schemes obviously be successful and get the funding they need to deliver it. Kind of resonates a bit with what Professor Matt Burke was talking about as well, previous guest, who's now CEO of Bicycle Queensland, actually. But he also talked a lot about the importance of doing, work around schools for that transformational aspect for society. So, yeah, super great discussion. Yeah, been great to have her on.
Yes, and when we were chatting just after recording, she came up with a great statement that having a road network without proper safe crossings is like having a Meccano set without the nuts.
No, we were like, we've got to get that in and repeat that for her, because that was too good to let that one be lost to the cutting room floor.
Yeah, and it's also interesting how a struggle it is just to get raised crossings and so on, although she's had great success in that particular council. But Australia-wide, it has been a struggle. And whereas, as you know, in places like Paris, they're doing school streets where they just close the street down entirely and often permanently, the street, at least in front of the school. So almost impossible to do too much for the safety of our kids, I think. So we might move on. We're coming to the end of our podcast, but as always, before we go, we finish with What's Up, which is a chance to tell you what we're up to and any news that you might be interested in. So what's up, Irene?
Well, our big news for CSense is that we're very excited to have won an iMove funding grant. So we'll be working on a very innovative project, working with the City of Sydney and also Surf Coast Council in Victoria and the Transport Accident Commission. And we'll be deploying 400 bike lights out across those different places. And we'll be taking all of this data and evidence to help improve cycling safety. And we'll be doing this through a very innovative way, using data, using AI, machine learning in our data dashboard, help make those data-led decisions. So really exciting project about to kick off, and we're incredibly grateful to iMove for the funding to be able to do this. And I know that Prue mentioned the Ride Score program as well in her evaluation, and I'm pleased to say that they were the other cycling project which received funding through iMove. So there's 8 projects in total. So it's fantastic that there are 2 cycling related ones in the funding that's been announced for iMove.
Absolutely. I believe the Ride Score one is in Perth, the next Ride Score.
Great. So next week is Ride to Work Week in Australia. And from CSense perspective, we like to encourage people to download our app. They can start making reports through our app. You don't need to buy one of the bike lights. So if you want to report a pothole or a close pass or anything that's concerning you about your ride, or even if you'd like to make a request for infrastructure, what we'll do is we'll collate all of those reports that are made during Ride to Work Week. And if we get enough of them, we'll put out some analysis in a blog about that. So taking a bit of a pulse on cyclists' views. And lastly, I'm going to be in Sydney next week for Mobility Live, and in Perth the following week for the Road Safety Conference. And there's a whole load of conferences actually that we're involved in till the end of the year. So do sign up to the CSense newsletter if you are interested to know about our various movements.
Never a dull moment in CSense, and hardly a episode goes by without some win or announcement. So well done, Irene. Keep all those plates spinning in the air.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I've just returned from a family trip to my hometown of Adelaide, which has a population of about 1.5 million and is the capital of, and by far the largest city in South Australia. There's a major construction project going on along the famous Glenelg tram line, which was the only tram track they saved in the post-World War II era when every Australian city except Melbourne ripped out all of their tram tracks. And fortunately, they're now spending $200 million on overpasses across 4 major roads. And better still, these overpasses will include the Mike Turner Bikeway, which is a shared cycling and walking path. So that will be roads that cyclists and pedestrians no longer have to cross, very busy roads, no longer having to cross at grade. And they're doing them all at once. They're building quite coordinated. It's quite impressive by the state government. So they've closed that part of the tram network for over 6 months, and they're working round the clock. I'm seeing very rapid progress. I was there 4 weeks earlier for the transport conference that you were also attending, and the progress they've made just in 4 weeks has been amazing. And meanwhile, the city of Holdfast Bay has also taken the opportunity to do major upgrades of Jetty Road Glenelg that have been desperately needed for years. There was not a single pedestrian crossing across a whole long stretch of that busy shopping street. And so the upgrades will include raised pedestrian crossings, wire footpaths, removal of some car parking spaces, and other improvements. And Jetty Road, as the name suggests, runs all the way down to the ocean and finishes with the Glenelg Jetty. And it's a very popular shopping and tourist street. And the tram runs right down the middle of this quite narrow street and stops at the ocean front. So when it's all done, there's a lot of congestion and disruption now, but it's going to be great for everyone when it's finished. Thanks for listening to the Squeaky Wheel podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe via your favourite podcast platform. We're planning to release 1 new episode per month on the 3rd Thursday of each month.
And please also, can we ask you to leave us a review or a rating on your preferred platform? This would be extremely helpful. It helps the algorithms, especially on Apple and Spotify, just to boost it and help more people learn about our podcast. You can find out more about Squeaky Wheel Podcast and contact us directly via our website, squeakywheelpodcast.com. Thanks so much. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Yes, thanks, Irene. And until next month, keep squeaking.